Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us okay?
We do have a quorum.
Are we still doing video or are we done? Do I need to change
Oh, yeah,
some
let's do
for the feature?
Oh, yes, I'm promoting the panelists. There you go. Should have gotten it invite.
Yeah, you have quorum four. Hopkins will be 5 to 10 minutes late. Catherine Keith will be participating virtually.
You brought a map. We can bring maps. Oh, yeah. I'm serious about planning here.
Yeah, just some visuals.
That's just handy for the office. People, doesn't come in to be able to help them out.
Okay.
Four board members.
So these are the attendees and the panelists. All the board members.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thank you, everybody. I think we're going to be adding. Mayor Hopkins will be a few minutes late until I hear that.
Right.
Okay. Mayor Cruz, I think it's in general, we're going to be trying to call in. We'll find out if that happens or not. And Catherine is in Anchorage. I think she injured herself and couldn't catch the plane, so she'll be attending also. That's the plan, I heard, I think. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Let's do introduction of the members and attendees. Let's go ahead and start with Mayor Church.
Oh, Mayor Larry Turch, City of North Pole.
Scott Kress, Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly. Jackson Fox, Fastly.
Charlie Cleaver, City of Fairbanks.
Ruby Lunsford, fast planning.
Corey Truliano, Fast Plan.
Okay, also for Delta, we want the people around the room here. You could start with
Tom Hewitt, Special Assistant Mayor's Office, Borough.
Helen Spillman, Borough Community Planning. Jack Marlon, as manor.
Patrick Gilchrist, Kate Lucy.
Brad Nelson, DOT.
and the folks online who would like to, please identify yourself as well.
Jason Olds, Air Quality Director and Policy Board Member.
Tanya
John-
Kukas, Morris Thompson, Culture and Visitor Center.
John Natardis, a DOT pre-construction.
Don Galligan with FNSP Planning.
Jennifer Wright, DOT pre-construction.
Kim Solian, MVP for transportation.
Catherine Keith, I see that you just joined us. I'm trying to promote you to panelist. Yeah. Can you hear us? See, your mic is working, but we're not getting audio from you yet. We can come back.
Mayor Hopkins joining us.
Thank you very much. Sorry for my readiness.
Yeah, Catherine, if you might try your mic out, just to make sure we can hear you.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody.
Okay, item 3, approval of the 19th agenda. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve the agenda of today, February 19th. Second.
Mayor Church, seconded by Brass.
Yep.
Anyone wishing to change the agenda or reorder it or whatever? Being none, Jackson.
Yes, Mayor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor Church. Yes. Mr. Kress.
Yep.
Mr. Cleaver.
Yes.
Ms. Keith.
Yes.
Mr. Olds.
Yes.
That passes unanimously, and item 4 would be approval of the January 15th, 2025 meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion for that?
Move to approve the Meeting minutes from January 15th, 2025. Second.
Two people again. Anybody wishing to make changes? Yes,
Mayor Hopkins? Yes. Mayor Kirk?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Clear?
yes,
Ms. Keith?
yes,
Mr. Olds?
Yes.
okay, brings us to number 5, staff with the group of share reports. This is pages 12 to 23 in your packet, Jackson.
Hello, Mr. Hager. So as shown on page 12, just want to give you all some updates on some meetings that occurred and presentations that were made over the past month. Starting out on this page here, I want to make note that I did have a meeting with just about the full staff of the Railroad Real Estate Department and the DOT project manager and DOT right-of-way agent working on the Chino River Walk project to kind of sort out where the right-of-way negotiations are stalled between the two entities for that project. At that meeting, it was a very productive conversation. I think everybody walked away from the table with a better understanding of the challenges on DOT side with the federal funding that they have and the restrictions and process that they have to follow, as well as on the railroad side, what process and challenges that they're experiencing in trying to get a long-term land lease or selling the property for the project. Discussed at that meeting was one potential solution for the Chino River Walk project that comes with probably the highest price tag. That would be having the project do full acquisition of the 2 parcels. We're trying to get the trail alignment on. It's about 12 acres of riverfront property on the Chino River. And the railroad is working on a third-party appraisal for sale of those 2 parcels in whole. So we don't have that number yet, but kind of penciling out what the neighboring property sold for per square foot along the river on Chino Lands Loop Road. It'd be about a $5 million acquisition. So I'm just reporting back as to the conversation and the potential for that as an option. The other option that we discussed, and this was an old idea that kind of fell apart a year and a half ago, but could be revisited, is that the city of Fairbanks enter into the long-term lease of the strip where the trail would go. And that would be sufficient for DOT to move forward because the city can accept the indemnification language that the railroad is asking for, whereas DOT as a state agency cannot accept that indemnification language. But that also comes with a large price tag. We didn't discuss what that was. But I got the general feeling that we could pay a lot of money for that option as well, not to the tune of 5 million, but $1 million or more perhaps. And you would have the land for 20 years, but the railroad could say, no, we want it back and we're going to sell these parcels and then please remove the trail from the property. So in any event, I've been long been a proponent of trying to get back some of the property from the railroad on the riverfront through town. They own most of the northern riverfront from the Borough Building all the way down to Pegger Road, and to try to get that back into the community's hands for a community purpose. So we're not taking any action on it at this time. An appraisal is being done. We will receive that at some point to continue this conversation, but just wanted to plant a seed and let you know that we're trying to keep the project alive and we're looking at some options, even though they might be expensive. Next, kind of switching subjects, I did attend and participate in the 3-day Alaska Peer Exchange down in Anchorage with our federal partners, state DOT, the other 2 MPOs in the state, and then our guests from North Dakota and Minnesota, their state DOT representatives and their MPO, a couple MPO representatives there to kind of, it was 3 days of learning how we all do our work and how we all work together, how MPOs and state DOTs coordinate with each other on our STIPs and our TIPs. I thought it was a very beneficial peer exchange to have. Clearly, we have some pretty big challenges here in Alaska, and we did walk away with a number of action items for each of us to work on here moving forward. But I wanted to highlight a few interesting things that I learned during the peer exchange from our peers in these other states. It was kind of interesting that for all the MPOs in North Dakota and Minnesota, their DOT seat on their policy board is ex officio. So it is a seat on their policy board, but it's a non-voting member. I also learned that for the MPOs in North Dakota and Minnesota, they have local project administration agreements such that if, say, a city street project was awarded funds through the MPO, that funding would be turned over to that city's engineering department or public works department to complete the design phase, the right-of-way phase, the utilities phase, and actually manage the construction. And this is, and I learned, this is new to me, but I learned that this is common all throughout the lower 48. We are one of the only states, if not the only state, that does not allow for this local project delivery method. At this time in the state, the only example of this is with the City of Fairbanks' engineering department, where DOT allows them to complete the design process for projects. But that's kind of the extent of it. DOT still manages the right-of-way phase, the utility phase, and they, of course, administer the construction. But underneath this model, I would think that projects could be delivered more cost effectively and faster, because you're basically expanding, DOT's department, so to speak, to other engineering or public works departments of different local governments that could deliver their own projects. We also learned how kind of a well-oiled machine these other two state DOTs are. For Minnesota, for example, they have a STIP team of 10 programmers in their headquarters office, as well as one STIP programmer in each district in their state. There's 8 districts, so they have basically a team of in total 18 people that strictly do the programming work on their STIP. And their methodology to keep things running smoothly is to do a STIP amendment each and every month for any project changes that come up. And then they replace their STIP every year. So that's a pretty tall order, but they have sounds like a very robust team to pull that off. So there's not delays and waiting for a TIP amendment. If you miss it this month, then get your funding needs into the one next month, et cetera. And it just kind of rolls forward. They also look at their projects as in a 10-year plan as opposed to just a 4 or 5 year plan. So they know that, once, like, we have a 4-year plan right now, but they know which projects are in the queue in year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, et cetera. That's already been pre-scored, predetermined. So anyways, we heard a lot of really good information and good examples from other states on how they operate. So back to the staff report. Kind of towards the bottom of the page there. Would like to make note that I did meet with Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation Air Quality Division staff on the conformity freeze. There has been some additional communication and coordination with the EPA. And we learned that there's a few additional steps that are needed to actually lift the conformity freeze. And so we're kind of, what I heard was we're looking towards the freeze being lifted in the fall, perhaps. It could be longer though, with the 30-day extension on the open public comment period that the EPA recently did. But it's not as imminent as I may have described during our last meeting. It will take more time for that conformity freeze to be lifted. And we're excited for when that occurs so that we can get our major highway projects back on track. That's the old Stees reconstruction, Airport Cushman intersection, Stees Joe interchange in particular. Also want to make note that we have received and reviewed proposals from consultant teams for our Metropolitan Transportation Plan update. This is our 20-year long-range plan, and we have selected a consultant team to do that work. And this morning we had a kickoff meeting for that scope. But the consultant team that we selected for this planning effort is the prime is R&M Consultants, and then as subs they have Kinney Engineering, which is in our building here. Michael Baker, which did our electric vehicle plan, and RSG. And this RSG is the firm that's doing our travel demand model updates. So we've got a good solid team, and there's some overlap with correlated work on that update. And at the very bottom, yesterday morning, we held or I should say, we hosted a workshop with DOT for the Highway Safety Improvement Program. This is a 2-hour-long workshop where DOT explained what the program is, how it works, and how and really drilled into the data-driven process that results in the projects that are funded with Highway Safety Improvement Program dollars. And that was about the first half of the workshop. And then the second half of the workshop, we discussed how these safety projects could be better coordinated with our MPO. They've recently, in the past year, improved their coordination with the Anchorage MPO on the Highway Safety Improvement Program projects, meaning coming to their technical committee, showing the safety data that they're looking at, like this, particular intersection has this many fatalities, serious injuries, et cetera. And then as they develop the alternatives for what the fix might be or the solution might be to address those safety locations, their technical committee and policy board get kind of an advanced preview of what DOT is thinking before these projects get the scope kind of gets finalized, and then it gets incorporated into their local transportation plans. So very productive meeting, very open conversation. And I think if we can follow what the department is doing for Anchorage up here in Fairbanks, the coordination could be drastically improved, I think. On the next page, in the correspondence and communications, we did receive a letter from the Commissioner's Office on the index of authorities governing the National Highway System facilities. We'll discuss that underneath item 8A. And then down underneath public outreach, just want to make note of 3 presentations that I made over the past month. The first one was to the Chena Riverfront Commission on the NOAA grant application that we partnered on for culvert replacements for Chena Slough, Cripple Creek, and then Lyrite Creek out on the Hot Springs Road. As well as I gave them an update on the Chena Riverwalk right-of-way negotiations. And this update was prior to my meeting with their real estate department, so it was a pretty light update. But had good discussion with them on that. And then more recently here, I did do a fast planning 101 presentation to the Planning Commission in a work session with them. It's about an hour or so long to let them know kind of who we are, what we do, and how we all work together on identifying transportation needs and projects to address those needs in our area. And then I also provided a presentation at the request of Representative Carrick's office to the House Transportation Committee. Specifically, she asked me to present on what happened with the STIP from the NPO's perspective and what is the outlook for 2025. I did give that presentation, and then the director for the Anchorage MPO provided a similar presentation from his perspective down in Anchorage. On the funding side, this is kind of the big action item here for you all today, item 8B. We held a 2-hour work session on February 4th for the technical committee on TIP amendment number 1 to work through all the different decision points that I outlined for that committee in January for projects that have additional funding needs or their schedule has changed. And they came up with a solid list of recommendations, which the very next day at their regular meeting, those amendments were made at that meeting. One of the, I think, good recommendations out of that work session and then the regular meeting the other day was to take a look at all the changes we're looking at the TIP and split out the minor changes from the major changes, and then lump the minor changes into an administrative modification, which you all can approve today. To get those all of those projects up to par, and then for the major changes, put those into a TIP amendment because the TIP amendments need to be released for a 30-day public comment period. And that really the primary purpose of the TIP amendment is to add in the new Highway Safety Improvement Program projects that the DOT is asking to include in our local plans. So we separated those issues so that the immediate needs could be met, and then these other requests which trigger amendment we go out for public comment. And so you'll see both of those documents underneath item 8B. And then page 14, this is related to item 8C. I have effectively paused our call for project nominations for electric vehicle charging stations based on what we have read and have been hearing out of the executive orders from not only the president, but also from the transportation secretary, Sean Duffy. So I believe that at this time, we have some risk involved. If we move forward with this project, there's possibility that we may not be reimbursed for that work with federal funds, because in the executive order in particular, electric vehicle infrastructures is specifically called out as a program to eliminate. So I tried to get some, we'll talk about this later under 8C. I tried to get some guidance out of our Alaska Division Federal Highway Office on this, but they cannot advise us as to the risks on this moving forward. So that doesn't make me comfortable. Provided I'm a little bit nervous about this, I'm pausing moving forward until we get more direction or guidance from Federal Highways on whether or not we can move forward with that. Okay, pages 15 and 16 show you the action items from the technical committee. All of these action items relate to item 8B, the TIP administrative modification and amendment. So we'll go over these later on the agenda. Pages 17 through 19 is the agenda for the 3-day peer exchange down in Anchorage. You can see what topics we discussed and were presented on. And then page 20 is the final action item list that came out of that peer exchange for all parties. Most of the action items are on the DOT side. The couple that are on the MPO side are number one, to propose a communication strategy to our policy boards and DOT. So this is something that all three MPOs are working on, a communication strategy during development of the STIP and coordination of the TIP with the STIP, et cetera. And we'll be discussing that at our MPO quarterly meeting in early March. And then the only other action item for us was to kind of institute a training for our committee and policy board members, basically do a fast planning 101 with our technical committee and policy boards and dive into depth on the relationship between the TIP and the STIP so that you are all educated as we move forward. And then beginning on page 21, I included the letter that the Associated General Contractors sent to Governor Dunleavy here late last month. This has been a big topic of discussion with the legislature and their House Transportation and Senate Transportation committees. There is a great concern by contractors throughout the state about the upcoming construction season. Last year, the construction season was light, and it looks like this year it is also light. I also had a number of phone calls from our local contractors that do work in our boundary, and they are very concerned about the outlook for this summer's construction season. So it's kind of interesting to hear them talk about laying off staff at these contracting organizations when the story has been for a number of years, especially since COVID, that they can't find enough workers to keep their projects on track. And that's been kind of a nationwide trend with vacancies in this field. But unfortunately, right now, contractors are looking at kind of downsizing their operations because the money's not flowing directly to them. In any event, I would encourage you to listen to those committee hearings where AGC presented to help kind of describe the issue at hand. And just want to make note, our local contractors are in that group of concerned organizations with this. And that concludes my staff report.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. Any questions from board members? Mayor Sturgeon.
In relation to the electric vehicle charging stations that were put in on hold, are there any other projects that are being considered as a hold off until we know more about how the executive orders are going to face those projects?
Not at this time. That's the only project type that I saw that was specifically flagged that I think that we should be concerned about. But But the other thing I'm concerned about too is that we have this new fund category, carbon reduction program funds, and I expect that that program will end with this transportation bill, may not be renewed in the next one. And so my hope is that we can utilize those funds in a timely manner before they disappear. And that's, but the project types that money is going to, I don't believe are in jeopardy. But we are living in a world of uncertainty right now with a lot of this.
Thank you.
Ms. Keith?
Yeah, a couple follow-up questions. I guess first of all, on the going back to the EV project, I'm curious who at the state DOT you've talked to concerning that pause, because we have different guidance than it seems you're operating under.
I had a meeting with Lauren Little and Randy Bailey.
And those are NEVI funds as part of that program?
No, we are proposing to fund the electric vehicle charging stations with carbon reduction program funds. So it's different. And EV charging is specifically eligible for those funds. I understand from the executive order, the NEVI funds were targeted and might be paused. But in any event, again,
I just advise, yeah, thank you. If it's carbon reduction, I just advise you to work more closely with the state than necessarily the Alaska office. It's the state's risk if we move forward with projects. You mentioned we are not comfortable with the risk. Well, we, the state, have decided that we're going to continue moving forward with project delivery unless we have different guidance coming from the Alaska Administrator Federal Highways. Communications with Commissioner has been, let's move forward on projects and then we'll work through challenges as we go. So from the state's perspective, we have been willing to take on that risk as a case-by-case basis. So if you're saying you're not willing to take on that risk, I guess I'm wondering who you're representing regarding risk adversity.
We're going to be getting to this later in the agenda too. Thank you, Catherine. Anyone else?
Okay, we get a placeholder in that because if there's projects we can move forward, we want to move them forward. Okay, then the second question has to do about the AGC letter that's being included in the AGC presentation. We work in facts and figures, so I wonder, Jackson, if you have any facts or figures that pertain to this loss of work. And I ask that because if you've watched the following presentations that the state has put on, there's been 3 of them where we provide facts and figures which state, quite the opposite trend. So are we just talking in anecdotes, or are there facts that you have that represent the fact that the department does not have a healthy season last year or this year?
So for projects within our boundary, right now, looking at the tentative advertising list, it might be 25 to 30 million when I total it up for this coming construction season. Historically, if you look at past construction seasons within our boundary, we've averaged about 50 million per year. So last year was light. This year appears to be light. And I'm not stating that it's entirely related to the STIP, realizing that we are under a conformity freeze, which is also hampering some of our large highway projects from moving forward at this time.
And also projects not being included in the transportation improvement program and other such things as was decided by this MPO, in recent years. So just want to focus on facts and figures so we can actually resolve any concerns that our contracting community does have. And when we're spreading anecdotes that don't have root in facts, it makes it hard to resolve actual problems going on. So yeah, so that's the comment. If you definitely watch those videos, also watch the departments where we have those facts and figures. So thank you.
Catherine, question for you. Did you see that letter from Associated General Contractors before, or was this the first time you saw it in the packet?
Yeah, no, we've seen it. It was sent to Commissioner, Governor. We saw it right away, and then we did provide a response back. It's a 6-page letter with the facts that says our contractor and payments have gone up every year for the past 3 years. And so the letter comments further on the high amount of contract awards, which will be going out this year. And that had in part to do with projects shifting out from 2024 into this year. And it also highlights, where the current contracts are going to which which contractors and which contractors aren't having success when they are submitting bids. So those are the things we're trying to focus on. If companies are not getting those awards, we want to figure out why. If it's not equitable distribution of contracts. So those are things that we're solving, but it's just the letter states, and we can make sure everyone gets that the problem is not that the work is not out there, because the money is moving. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep, Mayor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I haven't got a chance yet to watch the two hearings, the one on House Transportation and the one on Senate Transportation, where AGC and the Department of Transportation had their chances to testify, so I'll certainly go watch those as you both recommend. I have read both letters, the response from Commissioner Anderson and the AGC letter. Talking to local contractors, the numbers here can certainly be shown from the administration, and I appreciate the long list of anticipated advertised dates. A number of these larger ones happening in April, May, June, July, and August are certainly going to be very difficult for the projects to be happening here locally this summer. And talking to one of the leadership of one of the larger contractors here in town, they have one small project and are going to be laying people off. So facts and figures are absolutely important. Also the reality on the ground and how it ends up happening and impacting our ability to have a strong construction season is also a reality, and anecdotes can be anecdotes, but they can also be facts and figures when the reality hits the ground. So I'll be looking forward to following that transportation hearing and have read the response from Commissioner Anderson, like I said, with a lot of plans for improvements and modernizing the project delivery and forecasting. So not sure if a lot of those have gone yet, but I hope they have impacts in the coming years, because you lay people off for 1 year, they might come back. You lay people off for 2 years, it's going to be really difficult to get those Alaskans back in charge. So, or back on the ground and turning dirt. So thank you for that presentation and the response from Commissioner Anderson, but the reality is on the ground, and look forward to seeing the results of us being wrong on the numbers going in. I did have a question on the action items from the peer review meeting. Number 6 has in its page 20 of our packet. MPO coordinators are going to meet with James Starzak, Randy Bailey, and Adam Bradway to schedule a sit-down meeting with the Alaska Department of Transportation, Public Facilities, and MPOs on boundary amendments. Ms. Keith, do you have, I guess you weren't there, but do you have any information on when we might have that scheduled meeting sit down between the MPO coordinators and the Alaska DOT, or the Randy Bailey, Adam Bradway, and James Starzak on the boundary changes?
Yeah, thank you. That's the first time I heard of that follow-up meeting. Right now, they've been working to schedule meetings with individual MPOs, which is one conversation we hope to have here in the upcoming action item. So I don't know if that's been scheduled or not, but at the AMATS MPO policy board, they're meeting in March to have this topic on the agenda. And then ideally the boundary updates get worked from there. And similarly here, I do believe we need to establish, what's our path forward for having the conversations on the boundary change? Who wants to be present? Are we following the same process as last time? Those types of questions would be great to talk about. And I think it'll be helpful for our teams to be able to implement that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Look forward to seeing the results of that meeting in the future.
Mr. Kraft.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Jackson, I had a question on the EPA conformity freeze and that extension. So was that extension because of the additional public comment period, or I'm not, it's not clear.
There's 2 issues at hand with the conformity freeze. One is that we've learned more information from the EPA on the steps required to get to lifting the conformity freeze. So it's, despite that they have issued a public notice to potentially defer these sanctions, the EPA has to accept the amendments to the state implementation plan, which includes motor vehicle emission budget for our area. So once those are accepted, we have to go through a modeling process with our air quality consultant, Trinity Consultants, to look at our travel demand model and see if we are forecasted to meet the motor vehicle emission budgets that the EPA approved. And then there's a transportation adequacy determination that needs to be made by the EPA. So anyways, there's just these additional steps that we I missed in the process to get to lifting it. And this is compounded by the extra 30-day extension on the proposed approval of the state implementation plan amendments by DEC, which I believe is related to the energy audits for the real estate sector.
Well,
And Jason Knowles can probably speak to this much better than I can.
Yeah, I think as a point of clarification, Office of Air and Radiation doesn't have, like, the public comment period is still listed as closed. We're not getting a lot of clarification out of EPA, but the best estimates I've heard is that they can reopen that after 30 days. And the intent is that they would do that just for the energy audit piece and that regulation. The interim final decision that should start this process should continue. And so I don't think it will have a impact on sort of the steps that we have to take for the conformity freeze lifting. But as Jackson mentioned, we missed this as well in talking with our contacts at EPA, all these additional steps. I think that timeline is really what's driving the bus on it. The reopening of the public comment period, whether it has a big impact or not, the take home is we can't get it done as soon as we had been hoped and sort of suggested we might. But there is set to be another public comment period on a specific part of the regulation that may not have an impact on the timeline for the conformity freeze lifting, but there are still additional steps in that process.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. Sorry, through the chair. I guess is anybody willing to hazard a guess on the timeline at this point, or is it too murky?
Well, the guess provided to me was fall. If I were to make a guess, I would extend it out a little bit further and say December. I think it's going to be towards the end of 2025. So the air quality modeling is kind of a big effort. It's not something that you accomplish in a short amount of time.
Thank you. And Jackson, thank you for your testimony with the House Transportation Committee. I thought it was extremely well done, and you acquitted yourself quite well. I think you represented the MPO well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I just have one item. We completed the work on the glossary of terms and acronyms. Thank you. Planning.
Round of applause for Olivia.
Thank you, Olivia. If you can make some hard copies and have them available here.
Yes.
Too, I would really appreciate that. Okay, let's move on. Item 6, updates from DOT on statewide transportation improvement program. Who's presenting that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I can jump in here to provide a brief update. As most of you have likely seen, it is out for public comment officially as of yesterday, although it was posted over the weekend as well. The public comment period will go through until March 20th. And I encourage folks to please take a look at it. The online portal that we have is significantly improved from even the last round, where you have the ability to compare this last amendment to this one. So you can look project by project at what has changed. If it's a scope, a name change, location, dollar amount, and you can comment on each project within the portal itself, so you don't have to get redirected to a different website. We're looking forward to feedback on that, as well as all comments. After we have the opportunity to respond to comments, we seek to do that ideally within 10 days to 2 weeks if possible. We'll look forward to that. We'll then submit it to Federal Highways and Federal Transit Administration for approval. However, I should say we have been working with both federal partners, probably over the last month on this amendment, going through formatting, looking at eligibilities, other topics to incorporate that into this public comment version. There are some items that are, we'll be incorporating into the next step as we roll into, like Jackson was saying, other states, as we have our next full year step produced, that will probably have some additional formatting changes recommended by Federal Highways. But, otherwise, we're excited about this document and look forward to having the comments back from that. I do want to request, and I think this is something that, you can let us know when the appropriate time to talk about it is, but the recommendation just for Jackson to work with our staff on taking those project updates, the fiscal constraint tables that we have, and making sure that they align with expectations of fast planning. So if we work through the next technical committee, perhaps, but be just looking for those recommendations, how to take the funding that is programmed in the STIP to be spent within the metropolitan planning area, and then ensure that it aligns with future TIP amendments. You'll see as part of those projects do include the projects in the national highway system, like Steese Johansson, Airport Way, and Cushman. Those are included in the dollars that are demonstrated on the fiscal constraint tables for funds going into the MPA. So we'll have a lot to work through. The formatting that is requested from federal partners is a little bit different than what we had previously. In some ways, it's simplified. For example, we've pulled out a metro area table. So you can look at what's outside Anchorage area and Fairbanks area, and then what's within those. But then in addition to that, we have a fiscal constraint table just for fast area projects. So yeah, happy to answer any questions on those. And also to do a presentation on any changes within the amendment if that's requested.
Thank you. Any members have questions? Mayor Church.
Thank you. In reviewing the STIP a little bit yesterday, instead of leaving a comment, if we wanted additional information, how would we go about reaching out to the proper parties and getting that additional information rather than leaving a comment?
That is a great question.
Yeah, I didn't see it in the STIP or
Yeah.
on your website. I did have some questions about the truck parking survey and the state projects on Dan Creek up on the Dalton. I know that's kind of out of our area, but it truly is a passion of mine. I love the Dalton Highway and want to pay attention to that as an ex-truck driver. It's important to know what's going on around our state with that. So if you wouldn't mind emailing me, that would be wonderful, or just providing me some sort of contact for that. I would value that very much. Thank you, Ms. Keith.
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent point. And we'll make sure that there's an email that's available where you can go. But I think, yeah, that should be a function that we have beyond just saying, please contact me in the comment box. So that's a great idea. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just I don't think we need a full presentation, but is it a 30-day comment period right now that is open for that amendment? We're obviously gonna meet after that 30-day comment period ends. Maybe a synopsis in writing or something, would be great at the next meeting about what those changes are and how we hope they can fix the problem. So that might be great. And I have not opened the STIP amendment, so if that's all in there, I apologize. But at the next one, just so we can have a decent discussion about those amendments and understand how those are gonna be fixed going forward would be, I think, helpful. So thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we're gonna move on to item or 7. This is public comment period for items that are not action items on the agenda. And we would appreciate it if maybe you could try to keep it to 5 minutes or less. We don't have a clock, but just hope that you can help us there. Anyone in the room first? They're quiet here. Anyone online?
So we've got someone raising their hand, Lou Sassel.
Oh, hello?
Hello, is this Lou?
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, go ahead. Give us your name, please.
I'm not sure what it has, as my name on the meeting, but, my daughter usually uses this app, so what does it have me as, on this meeting?
This is fast planning meeting. Is that what you
Oh.
wanted to be in?
Yeah, what is my name?
Us trying to get you to say his name. It's
We'll just remove them.
thanks.
It's Lou Sassel. It's,
Okay, I think we got a problem there, so.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Public testimony is closed. That takes us to old business. It's an action item, Alaska DOT's Metropolitan Planning Area Boundary Review and proposed revisions to the intergovernmental operating agreement. This is postponed from the last meeting and it's on the agenda for this meeting. First, let's go to public comment. Anyone online? Seeing nobody, staff report to bring us up to date here.
Sure, it's clear with, so including your packet on pages 24 and 25 are my review comments of the letter that we received from the Commissioner's office. I have read the letter from the Commissioner's office a couple different times now to try to digest the information and I think there's some disconnects here that I wanted to point out to you in my comments with some of the citations provided in US Code and the Code of Federal Regulations, as well as interpretation of terms that are used in the transportation planning process. I don't think I need to go through all of these. Much of the comments that I have here, there are some new ones, were stated in our last policy board meeting when we had Sean Lynch present to present the edits. But just to give you my take on what's being said in the letter, I put together this 2-page staff memo. And I also included the section in our Transportation Improvement Program document where we as an MPO define what regionally significant projects are. So,
Okay, before you do that, board, would you like to hear from Ms. Keith first, their presentation, or the letter first? What's your preference?
I don't have a preference, so I guess we can go with Ms. Keith or the will of the chair direction. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, Ms. Keith, let's have you go ahead. We've got your letter here and I appreciate that. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the memorandum from Jackson here or not, and feel free to respond to that also. So I'm turning it over to you.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have not seen this memo, so I'll take a look at that. Yeah, as soon as I just kind of wrap up a few comments, but the letter that we sent out on February 11th to you, Mr. Chair, was just a follow-up as a request from the State Department of Law on the index of authorities that we had been referencing when Sean Lynch was presenting. I believe that was about 3 meetings ago. So the attached list of indexes, that's just detailing referencing the regulations and statute where appropriate. So there isn't interpretation, there isn't any extrapolating. It's just here are the reference regulations that pertain to our collaborative planning processes and planning authorities. So in the letter that introduces the focus, which, for us has to do with planning authorities on the national highway system. And then also just, again, these actions moving forward with meeting so we can resolve any boundary concerns that we have, and that as an immediate next step in our eyes, and then continuing the conversations on the operating agreements, which, you know, really could happen in parallel. But the letter just walks us through that, and happy to answer any questions on that. But, you know, our goal here is to just be focused on delivering projects and doing the work that benefits the public here. We're working continually with Federal Highways and Federal Transit so we can have be in sync with our efforts, and just want to do the same with our MPO partners in this MPO, of course, which we are a part of. So we don't see any harm in being able to have discussion on process and where we're at with things, so that we don't have any delays and that the public doesn't see any delays, or that our contracting community isn't seeing delays. So we're eager to have conversations and working sessions to talk through anything with boundaries. And then if there are concerns over language in the operating agreement as it pertains to authorities, you know, we're happy to have those and just be able to move things along. So thank you.
I'm sure we're gonna have some questions here, and I have some of my own, but, Board, you have questions? Go first.
I guess I'll ask a quick question before someone else jumps. Thank you very much, Ms. Keith, for that little synopsis. You had said, this is a letter from Department of Law, and, we were looking for something from, the AG's office on this. The letter is, from Department of Transportation and signed by you as Catherine Keith. Is this the opinion of the Attorney General, and the Assistant Attorney General, Sean Lynch, in this letter, or is it specifically from you on how the Department of Transportation and not the legal opinion sees this?
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Mayor. The Index of Authorities is prepared by our Chief Counsel, Sean Lynch, as well as, you know, back and forth on the letter. The letter is, yes, absolutely from myself in this role as Acting Northern Region Director. So yes, it represents the Department of Law's interpretation and understanding of the regulations and statutes that apply.
All right, so that's gonna be my next question. Thank you for beating me to it.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have some for you. I mean, the crux to me is on the first page. It says, well, both the state and the NPO have a duty to cooperate in development of the TIP and STIP. Federal law mandates that this cooperation be directed toward ensuring the inclusion of the state-selected NHF projects in these planning documents rather than their exclusion. Later it says that changes must be, I think, mutually agreed to. You know, I'm trying to remember, this has been kind of going on for about a year and a half. And I'm wondering what the genesis of this was, and I can ask you that, and maybe Jackson later on here. But what was the catalyst that got this thing kind of off kilter? Was there a particular project, or what, in your opinion, what's driving this as an example?
A couple things came together, and yeah, thank you for that question. I would say there's two factors. One of the factors had to do with the renewal of our STIP and being able to, but this being in for the first time, instead of programming projects and programs within the STIP, they all needed to be on the TIP, and there wasn't a grace period. So our NHS projects may have also been listed in the TIP, but they were certainly programmed in full in our STIP. Projects that have been in the STIP going back over 20 years, programs, including programs for the FAST area, they've been in our STIP for a very long time. So we were covered and had a federal document in which we could move forward with. But then with very little turnaround time, that decision was reversed, and anything that was within the STIP had to be completely removed. And if it wasn't on the TIP, then it wasn't moving forward. So there were certain projects that didn't yet have full updates in the TIP Airport Way in Cushman, for example, it was in the TIP, but it didn't have construction funding in the TIP. Therefore, we couldn't move forward obligating the project until it had construction funding in the TIP. The Steese Milepost 5 bridge replacement was one, as well as the Richardson Highway Milepost 365 bridge replacements. Those two projects were at the crux of disagreement as to the use of federal funds, and federal funds which are not related to the sub-allocation population funds that are distributed to be spent specifically in the Fairbanks area. So those two projects, if they weren't included in the TIP, were at that point not moving forward. And the consternation was then about the boundary because the Richardson Highway was not in a boundary. So there wasn't a cause to have it removed from the STIP. But that took many, many months, if not a year, of kind of dispute resolution. So to sum up that long-winded remark, the first issue was having to remove projects from the STIP so that they're solely programmed in the TIP. And then when projects weren't programmed correctly in the TIP, they got pushed out. Contractors didn't see the work. But there was certain disagreement about Chena Milepost 5, which is a bridge that needs to be replaced. That was elected to, or voted to be removed from the TIP as an NHS project, a bridge project, and then the Chena Bridge as well. So thank you.
Mr. Kress.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ms. Keith, you said this is the first time there's a requirement that the STIP needed to be reflected in the TIP. And at this coordination meeting, I feel like the federal partners, it was the first thing they made very clear that they did need to be reflected and that they've always needed to be reflected in the TIP. So it seems like the state's interpretation has changed. And I know you said there is an interpretation here, but clearly Federal Highways is interpreting this differently. Could you talk about that difference of opinion?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and we're not disagreeing on the interpretation. Like, yes, absolutely. This is the right way to do it, by having not double programming projects. The problem had been, that's been our practice going back a couple of decades from all of our research. So what's different this time was just this hard, requirement to actually very much separate them. And if that wasn't the case, then projects weren't moving forward. So we have no problem with working on that, but there was a bit of time. We're still like a year after, still trying to coordinate our schedules on the TIP and STIP. So it just needed a little bit of time once the determination was made that this is no longer a practice that we're having in the state of Alaska. So that's why we'll say a lot that new practices, because the regulations, they haven't changed. Regs, these have been the same always, but our teams were under the impression that this was an acceptable practice, just like our teams were under the impression we could overprogram the STIP and not have to be in fiscal constraint. Well, those weren't the regulations, statutes, or facts from Federal Highways and FTA. And, they called us on it, which was good, and we fixed it. But it did create that disjointedness with how to move these projects that were already started. Does that answer your question?
I think it's as close as I'm gonna get. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Jerry again. Another question, hypothetical. Let's say we have a NHS product and a project in the TIP. And for whatever reason, the policy board thinks, oh, we hate this project. We don't want it in here. According to your letter, it says we really don't have the right to eliminate an NHS project. We could maybe amend it with the agreement of DOT, as I understand the letter. Is that the process as you folks see it?
Yes, 100%. That's how the regulations read. However, when we ask questions about this, and we've talked to a lot of people, including the Federal Highways leadership, how do we do this if we're not agreeing? And what they say is just keep talking until you guys agree. Well, you know, there's gonna be times that not everybody agrees. So how do we work through it? And so while MPOs may not have what we would call a veto authority, you know, if we're not mutually understanding the benefit of a project, then yeah, we need to keep communicating about it and finding ways to work through it. I think the problem over the past year was that we just didn't have time without delaying projects, the opportunity to work through projects. Again, it was just disjointed. But yes, that's 100% right. That we need to work through the NHS issues, but the planning authority does technically remain with the department in close collaboration with the MPOs so that we have things done in a way that the planning entities all concur with.
To the board's edification, Jackson, do we have any NHS projects in our TIP?
Yes, we have many of them.
I'll name them all. You can.
Okay.
I know some of them, but name them.
Yep, will do. Okay, Airport Cushman Street intersection. The Airport Way West improvements, which was completed. Systematic signal upgrades. I don't know if Old Steve's Highway is actually on the list of NHS. It may not be. Parks Highway Sheep Creek extension, traffic signal. The Richardson Highway milepost 357, 362 bike pet path that was just completed. Richardson Highway milepost 351 interchange, which was recently completed. And Richardson Highway milepost 360 to 361 railroad grade separated facility. The Steesh Joe Expressway interchange, Steesh Expressway milepost 2 to 5 resurfacing. And then also completed within our TIP was University Avenue.
Thank you. Okay, if I don't see any other questions from the board members, it's an action item. We would need a motion.
The operating agreement amendment. Definitely is.
The motion to table, is there a second to that? Motion by Mayor Hopkins. Seeing no second, that dies. Mr. Krass.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hoping we could also get Jackson's interpretation that he had supplied a letter as well that kind of covered this letter. I was wondering if he could walk us through his response.
Jackson.
Okay, so beginning on page 24 is my comments to the policy board on the content of the letter received from the Commissioner's office. These are in chronological order of the statements and paragraphs made in the letter. So beginning with number 1, regionally significant projects, the letter states that they are per se projects on the NHS are per se regionally significant. That's an inaccurate statement, despite the fact that there's a definition by the Federal Highway Administration. They expect us to define criteria for what we consider regionally significant in our transportation improvement program. We have a definition and criteria that we use in our transportation improvement program for regionally significant projects. That is included on page 26. So this develops criteria beyond the federal highway definition. Currently in our boundary, the only project that is considered regionally significant is the Steesh Johansson interchange, because you are adding traffic capacity and you're taking an at-grade intersection and making it a separated grade intersection. So, but many of our projects in the NHS are pavement preservation, so mill and paves. That's not regionally significant. Intersection safety improvements, and if you're doing a bridge replacement where you're not adding any additional lanes or capacity to that bridge, it's also not regionally significant. based on our decision. So again, we only have one. It's not all projects on the NHS that are recently significant. Comment number 2, this US code reference 23 USC 134 K5 is listed in numerous places in the letter. When you go to that section of US code, it does strictly relate to transportation management areas with a population of over 200,000. So this is only for, in the state of Alaska, this section of US code only applies to Anchorage, does not apply to us. The substantial change, number 3 there, this is what was discussed in our last policy board meeting, or sorry, 2 policy board meetings ago when Sean Lynch was here. There has been no change in authorities of our MPO since we were created in 2003. In our long-range plan and our short-range funding plan, our TIP, every project proposed for federal highway funding and Federal Transit Administration funding must be included in those documents and has been included in those documents since 2003. So over 20 years, we've operated in compliance with the regulations. So this is, for me, a challenging one to understand. Yes, there was some redundancy of showing these projects in both the STIP and the TIP, but the ultimate authority is this policy board on which projects move forward or don't move forward. Page 25. There's a comment made in the letter. I'll read it out loud to you real quick before I explain my comment. But the letter states that DOT cannot recommend the governor's approval of an expanded metropolitan planning area that includes additional NHS miles. As an MPO, we did not add any additional national NHS miles to our boundary. We utilized the U.S. Census Bureau's base urban boundary as our minimum boundary, and we expanded it to what we foresee to be urbanized 20 years from now, but that did not include any additional NHS miles. The additional NHS miles that are in our new boundary, that was a decision made by the U.S. Census Bureau, and that was published in the Federal Register, and there was an open public comment period if DOT disagreed with adding those additional miles. But just for the record, Fast Planning did not add those miles, the U.S. Census Bureau did. Then number 5, this was gone over in our meeting 2 months ago with Sean Lynch. This US code reference is resurfaced 23 USC 103B3 modifications to the NHS. That strictly relates to segments of highway that are either designated national highway system or not. It does not mean modifications to the NHS does not mean construction projects in the NHS. Number 6, the Alaska statutes referenced. I believe that most or all of the Alaska statutes referenced came from the 1970s and 1980s. Prior to the 1991 transportation bill, which greatly expanded the authorities of the MPO in the project selection process within our boundaries. So these Alaska statutes are specifically not listed in our operating agreement because they are in part in conflict with other regulations. And these statutes have not been modernized, and there's been 3 or 4 transportation bills since those were passed. So they are out of date and again in part in conflict with federal regulations. And then number 7, towards the end of the document, is a reference of the municipal highway plan. This is in statute, this is a Waltham transportation plan. Those two are not to be aligned. So I just wanted to have some comment to the policy board for context from what I read and what I know to be of the law and regulations concerning transportation.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you putting this together, and I'm spending time at the coordination meeting. I found that there was a lot that was agreed upon between the MPOs and ways that we could work together better with DOT. And we sit closely with DOT. They're here at the table with us often, sometimes on Zoom. And I think that, in a lot of ways, I think DOT is, having worked for a state agency, I know how mission focused they can be, and they want to get the job done. And they, over and over, we hear, we don't want delays. We want to get this done. However, we are, I believe, running roughshod over the public process, and it's gotten us in trouble in the past. It's impacting our construction season this year. I think that we would do well to ensure that we are treading on sound legal footing in the future. You've outlined some issues with DOT's interpretation of, state statute, federal regulations. And I would request that, Mr. Chair, that we have an action item at our next meeting to consider retaining counsel to help advise us on this matter, to ensure that we don't inadvertently impact upcoming construction seasons, run afoul again of our federal partners. That said, I don't have any additional motion that I want to take on this today, and I would echo the mayor's motion. I would move to table this.
Okay. First off, if you, for our staff here, if you must add an action item for the next meeting, it's formally stated that, let's do that, I guess. And a motion has been made by Mr. Kraus to go ahead and table this item. Is there a second?
I'll say that.
Okay, so seconded by Mayor Hopkins. I'm forgetting my Robert's rules. Is that open for discussion or not?
I think a motion on the table should be, or is available for discussion.
Let's say, whether it is or not, let's do it. People need to speak to it. Any board members wishing to speak to it?
Can I ask a question? I'm trying to clarify the intent of the motion. We're moving to table this. Can we?
Tabling means defeating. They use the term loosely.
Okay.
If you do not table it to a certain date, it's dead. It's like voting no.
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
At a future date, one of the board members could also request that it be brought back up.
You can reintroduce any item you want.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Is your motion?
Oh, no, I just had the question. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've had a fair bit of discussion regarding this and the impacts it would have on our municipal planning authority here and our ability to continue to work with DOT with a strong local voice here that I think we've seen for decades without much substantial change recently. So I think we have an opportunity to save ourselves a lot of legal back and forth, a lot of legal dollars spent, and take an action here today that I think we could substantially defend and make sure that our community has the same strong voice it's had since the creation of the MPO several decades ago. So we can move forward here if we are able to table this and leave it available to bring forward the future date. But other than that, I think we can understand the impact that this would have on us here at the MPO level. So thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Oh, I'm sorry, Catherine. Go ahead. Keith?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a couple things. First of all, having legal counsel may be advisable. Jackson, I appreciate your memo. I didn't realize that you had a legal background or that you were a lawyer. But that's what I would advise for this policy board. The letter doesn't come from DOT. This is from the Attorney General's office. So if we're saying that the legal opinion of the Attorney General's office is incorrect, that's what, I would recommend that be prepared in writing if that's what the consensus is that this policy board is coming to. This isn't about DOT. This is about the State of Alaska Attorney General's office clearly defining the legal responsibilities of the state. So just want to make that clear. The second thing to make clear is that we have to have an approved boundary by the end of 2026, so December 2026. So tabling conversation doesn't help us get to that date any quicker. So I'd be eager, in order to keep project delivery moving in the Fairbanks area and in order to serve the public's best interest, that we continue these conversations. If we don't, as months go by, we miss out opportunity to effectively engage. So these, the request here is that we continue to work on it, and that's Jackson, other staff members, they work with our GIS team. We review any boundary changes to the point that it can be determined to be legally sufficient so we can move forward. We just keep the conversation going. I'm unclear what tabling things does for moving us forward or how that supports the residents of the Fairbanks area. But again, I'm just one voice on the policy board, but from the informed perspective of the department and where we're at in the process in order to keep projects moving forward, I have grave concerns if we're not keeping a conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mayor Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, I'll be right, hopefully my last one. Just a clarification on the letter that we received on February 11th, from the state. It might have had it does not come from the Department of Law. It comes from the Department of Transportation and, not signed by the Attorney General's office or any designee there. So I guess I would take a bit of a, disagreement with that. And while it might have their input on it, they did certainly not sign it and it's not coming from them. Additionally, the boundary, my understanding, Ms. Keith, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the current boundary proposed, following the 2020 census that expands that, it goes into effect in December 2026, whether the governor at that time or the current governor signs it, correct?
No, that's not correct. If we don't have an approved updated boundary by 2026, then we're out of compliance. And
Is there
happy to have the attorneys general submit a letter if that's requested. This was in response, this index of authorities was provided in response to the chair's request. So if you're looking for a more official determination, happy to provide it. This was an informational letter to help everyone have further conversation on this. There wasn't an action item required out of this letter. So if that's something that would help this board have further conversation, we can ask that to be issued.
Is there anybody from the Federal Highways or Federal DOT that can help answer some of these questions on the call?
Olivia, is there anyone from Federal Highways?
I don't see anybody.
I don't see anybody from Federal Highways, just Steve, Emily Haynes.
Yes, she's from
Okay,
Office.
yep, I feel better.
Emily Haynes, are you available? Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
she's
I'm
there.
here. I just stepped in. We are happy to review in any capacity. We weren't requested to review this letter before it was sent to you. So if you need any federal interpretation, if that's what you're asking, or maybe if somebody could just clarify the question and I can try and assist.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is, if the current governor does not sign the boundary expansion by December of 2026, for which we'll have a new governor, because the governor don't be determined without, does it go into effect by running out the clock, or is there no boundary in existence for the MPO at that time, or would it be the current one? How does that go into effect in December of 2026 for the expanded boundary based on the 2020 census?
And I'm jumping back to the December 5th letter here. It must be adjusted and approved, and that's through agreement between the MPO and the governor by December 29th of 2026. And it must include the urban areas as well as any areas expected to become urbanized within 20 years. I do see that the letter does not discuss the consequences of that. And I can take that back as a request of the policy board if that's what you would like to get that clarification.
I think that'd be a good idea if we could get that going forward. We probably need to understand that implication.
Okay.
Can I follow up with it, Mr. Chair? Thank you. Do you have the letter from the Alaska Department of Transportation from February 11th in front of you?
I was sent a copy, I believe, on Tuesday, so I can open it, but I've not taken any action on it.
That's understandable.
Yes, I have it open.
Okay, great, thank you. In terms of project selection, the letter cites 23 US code 134K5. That is on the third paragraph down on the first page. does that code relate to transportation management areas with a population over 200,000? Explicitly, do you know?
I will look real fast.
Yeah, sorry for putting you on the spot, but I appreciate your quick
That's
action.
okay. So it was 134K,
5.
K5. K is specific to transportation management areas, which is over 200,000 individuals. So that would be the AMATS area in Alaska.
Thank you, and so not the fast line. Thank you. So that the section of the letter does not apply to us here. Modifications to the National Highway System, under code US code 23 US code 103B3. That's this code that is cited here in the letter as well. Sorry, I'm looking for where that is. Or maybe that's our response to the Mr. Fox's response to the National Highway Selection. This section of US code refers to designating highway routes as a National Highway System route, and is not relevant to classifying or unclassifying route. Or sorry, is not relevant to the agreement between the Metropolitan Transit Area and TIP, correct? It's just relevant to including or excluding National Highway System routes, and that is 23 US Code 103B3.
Yeah, that's correct. It is just for identifying portions of the highway system within Alaska that are part of the national highway system, and which there are like performance measures associated with. And it also includes the interstate system.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then if a state governor's administration does not make any public comment during the public comment period for an expanded MPO boundary, does that mean they are, by the Federal Highway System's opinion, does that mean they are in agreement with that boundary if they did not offer any comment on that boundary change at the time?
I can't speak to how the Census Bureau incorporates comments or how that might or might not affect urban area boundaries. What I can say is that the finalized urban area boundaries are the minimum boundary areas that can be used for a metropolitan planning area. And then it also has to incorporate the area forecasted to be urbanized within 20 years.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
You done?
Yes, sir. Just wanted to go through and make sure we were all on the same page.
Anyone else on the policy board? Just a few final comments. Now I'm kind of sadder at this point, in all honesty. I've always enjoyed being part of the board. There's 4 distinct members here, and we don't always get along. I know being a city rep, we've had our disagreements with the borough and the state over time, and we know that stays. I appreciate it when Ryan Anderson, he was I think our first chair at the new nonprofit. Yeah. And it was kind of smooth sailing, and just a joy to work with Ryan at the time, and I appreciate that. To me, the big problem is going to be changing an intergovernmental operating agreement is almost impossible. Getting that thing in the first place was almost impossible, because it requires 4 different entities and their legal staff to all agree with each other on what to do or what not to do. I don't really see that happening. I'm wondering if some of this could be accomplished by the bylaws of our organization rather than the intergovernmental operating agreement. That's something I haven't explored, but maybe we should. That's something maybe DOT should explore instead of going after the operating agreement, just to look at our bylaws and see if there's something that can be done there that helps you and needs the improvement of this body here. So something to think about between maybe now and the next meeting. right now, what we're essentially doing by just tabling this is continuing the standoff, which is, I guess, okay. That's what we're gonna be in. And we can continue to discuss this as time goes by. But if that's possible to use the bylaws, I would be very much interested in, because I think that the bylaws after a period of time should always be looked at for modification. I tried to change them last year and was not successful, but that doesn't mean other changes may not be in the future. But to have the four entities have a designee maybe at looking at the bylaws themselves, just an idea. And then unless there's another discussion, we're gonna go ahead and take a vote here. Seeing none, Jackson, the motion is to table.
Mayor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor Hirsch.
Yes.
Mr. Krass. Yes. Mr. Cleaver.
Yes.
Ms. Keith. Ms. Keith
Sorry, no.
and Mr. Olds.
No,
Okay, it is approved.
4-2 is what passes.
Say that. Okay, we're moving on. Well, no, I'm sorry. We had a request from board member Kraft to talk about the legal, hiring independent legal counsel. This is not an action item. Did you want to continue discussing that or?
You know, I think we covered it pretty well. The only thing I would add is I want to make clear that I'm not doing this in any way to choose sides or be adversarial. I think it would behoove us to ensure that we're on very solid legal footing. We have found ourselves running afoul of our funding partners, and it has impacted the construction season this year. It's impacted funding for our community. And I think that all of us, including DOT, you know, as members of this MPO, will benefit from some additional advice and some expertise in this area. And I appreciate that they've got their legal counsel. The borough has legal counsel. Yeah, I'm sure you've got your attorneys, but I think it will help us to get some perspective for the policy board as a body. And so I look forward to discussing this further at our next meeting.
Okay, any questions? Ms. Keith?
Yeah, just one follow-up question. Because of course, I think this is a great idea where we can have some trusted legal opinions to talk through these things. Have you communicated with or been given the contacts for the Federal Highways Headquarters attorneys?
Personally, no.
No.
Okay.
I'm seeing everybody shaking their heads, no.
Okay, because when we have an opportunity to have that meeting, I think they'll be helpful for this, because while they're clear on the interpretation of the regs, they're also very clear on the requirement for very thorough 3C processes. And I think when we have individuals identified that will work through these, I think putting them in touch would also be helpful.
Okay, thank you for that input, appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay, we're gonna move on then.
Thank you.
So be item 8B. Transportation improvement tip. Action item. There's a lot of paper here.
Yeah. To make it brief.
I tried to make sense of this yesterday and last night, and I think I got it. You'll notice in your packet, the first part, there is a tip that's being presented. And then an amended version is pages 97 on. So Jackson, you want to take us through this first before well, actually, let's go to public hearing first, I'm sorry. Anyone wishing to speak on this and the tip in the room here? Anyone online? No. Okay. Now, let's go to staff report.
Okay, I will try to keep this brief and not get into the weeds on this. But we have prepared two separate documents for action here today. One is a TIP administrative modification that captures all the minor changes for our projects. And then the second document is our TIP amendment, which takes care of the major changes to projects in our boundary, which is primarily new highway safety improvement program project. The TIP amendment needs to be released for a 30-day public comment period. The administrative modification does not, it just needs to be approved by the board. So what I'll say is that between staff and the technical committee, a lot of work has gone into these two documents. The technical committee has had it before them 3 times now at their last 2 regularly scheduled meetings, as well as a 2-hour workshop on all of the decision points that we have. And we have had a tremendous amount of input from DOT project managers as to the status of the project schedules and funding needs. So everything requested by those individuals and the technical committee should be included in this administrative modification and amendment have been made. So these are documents ready for your action here today. And what I've included in the packet is the action items from the technical committee at their January and February meetings. They made a series of amendments. Every amendment that they made was unanimous with the exception of the PD Nordale roundabout project. That was the only one where there was a split vote. So I have suggested a motion on page 57 at the bottom, if the policy board member is inclined to make that. But what we're asking you to do is accept all of the technical committee's recommendations for the TIP from the January 8th and February 5th meetings, except for Pearl Creek access improvements and Barnett Street reconstruction, and approve the administrative modification and release the amendment for a 30-day public comment period following interagency consultation for air quality conformity. Speaking directly to Pearl Creek and Barnett Street, Pearl Creek, of course, we're aware that the school has been closed by the school district. There's $4.5 million in funding there. Despite the fact that the technical committee requested that we cancel that project, I need to bring to you all a proposal where that funding may go to. But also there's continuing conversations in the background about the future of that school, whether it become a magnet or a charter. But provided these are air quality funds where we have to have a calculated admission benefit, I don't know that if we don't have bus traffic or a reopened facility, I don't know that we can utilize these funds for that project. But it could still be rescoped, resubmitted to us and nominated for funding using a different funding source. So there's some uncertainty there. We don't need to take action on Pearl Creek here today. I would appreciate if you'd let me wait until our March meetings to bring you all some options moving forward with that funding and some better dialogue on what to do with that project. Also, the project is in the final design phase, and we'd like to see that work completed so that the plan set is shovel ready should ever be brought back up in the future. And then with regard to Barnett Street reconstruction, there was a motion to initiate a project start for that in the TIP. That is contingent upon the conformity creek being lifted. And provided it's not being lifted imminently, we have removed that from the documents that are in your packet. However, we are proposing $130,000 for advanced project definitions so that the city of Fairbanks can continue their utilities research, survey and contaminated soils testing out in Barnett so that they can have a better understanding of the costs involved with that before we initiate a project start. So there still is some money for Barnett, but it's underneath the advanced project definition program included in here. And then lastly, I just want to note, I did include public comments received for the PD Nordale roundabout as well as appropriate elementary access improvements in the packet. So I'm hoping folks will have some discussion on those two topics, however brief it may be. And then I want to make note that in front of you all is an email that I received this morning from DOT with regard to the Chena Ridge Road resurfacing project. This is a preventative maintenance project by DOT. They were planning to take this to construction this summer with a scrub seal application on the pavement, which I think might buy the life of the facility another 5 years or so. But DOT is proposing to change the scope to be a true mill and pave, where the entire asphalt surface will be replaced and restored, which could extend the life of the facility for 20 years. And they have identified funding, that would cover that cost increase. They would raise the dollar amount from 12.5 million up to 24.5 million. And so I would also appreciate a motion, on this email that you have before you, supporting this modification. And if you support this modification to this project, I will include it in the amendment before it goes out for public comment. Best I could do it.
Thank you. Ms. Keith and Mr. Rolls, did you see the email Jackson's referring to from DOT?
Catherine Keith was on the email,
Okay.
but, Mr. Ellis may not have seen it.
Thank you.
My mute button was buried. No, I don't think I've seen that.
I can try to forward it to him.
I think that's an easy one that we can add into it, but. Any questions from board before we go to a motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment, I guess, two quick questions. Do we need to make the motion to amend the Chena pump before or after we take the action requested motion?
I would say if you're favoring Mr. Fox's motion here, I would just add it to that. And then as far as the roundabout goes, we can discuss that separately, whether you keep it in, take it out, or do whatever you want.
The PD roundabout?
Yeah.
And so would we need to make that a motion?
Keep that a separate item.
Okay, so that's not included in the requested action motion based on your opinion, Mr. Chair. Because I do want to discuss that, so I'm just asking which direction we go.
Right, it's not a part of the motion, but the project is in there. Yeah, so. And if you don't like that project in there, and you want to pull it, you can do it, or you want to change it, you can, or you can sing its glories.
On a question, I think, for Mr. Jackson on that PD Road Nordell one. It goes forward to the public comment period, and then at the next meeting, we would have an opportunity to discuss the results of the 30-day public comment period on the PD Nordell roundabout at the next policy meeting.
Yes, if the PD Nordell roundabout is left in the TIP amendment, that would be subject to a 30-day public comment period. And we do, when we post these amendments, we specifically list what's being added to the TIP. So the public should be able to easily identify that that is being added into our funding plan. So if you chose to allow this to move forward as it's shown in the packet with the roundabout included, I guarantee you will get public feedback for consideration. And yes, after the close of the comment period, we resolve comments and then we bring it back to the board for approval of the amendment. So there is the second bite at the apple in the future on that if you don't want to act on it today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions before we get a motion here? I hear a motion. Mr. Grass.
I had a question for Jackson on the, speaking of roundabouts, it jogs something loose. I believe there's a, work on a roundabout on Chena Pump.
Yes, this summer, Chena Pump and Chena Small Tractor Road.
How would that interface with this proposed project from DOT?
Those two have already been coordinated with each other.
Okay.
So they have separate termini that meet up with each other.
Okay, great.
I need a motion.
I move to accept the technical committee recommendations for the TIP from the January 8th and February 5th meeting, except for the Pearl Creek Elementary access improvements and Barnett Street reconstruction projects, and approve TIP administrative modification number 5 and release TIP amendment number 1 for a 30-day public comment period following interagency consultation for air quality uniformity, and accept the change for TIP reference NFHWY00570 for the Chena Pump repaving project to go from $12.5 million to $24.5 million for phase 4 construction in FY25.
Very good.
Second.
Do I hear a second?
Longest motion ever.
Second.
Second by Mr. Discussion?
Quickly, I'll just thank DOT, statewide pavement and bridge preservation program for finding sufficient funding to move forward with that. It'll be great to have a much longer lifespan for that well-used road.
Anyone else? Oh, Mr. Fox, did you call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor Church.
Yes.
Mr. Krass.
Yes.
Mr. Hayward.
Yes.
Ms. Keith.
Yes.
Mr. Holt.
Yes.
Okay, now let's take up the other issue if anybody wants to.
You did them both.
You didn't vote. I did it wrong. I wanted to give people an opportunity to amend it if they wanted to for the Nordell vote.
You have another chance at the March meeting, right? Or were you hoping to?
Well, I guess for my sake, clarification, and I'm gonna rely on DOT folks on this one. We're going out to a public hearing, but we were talking about this briefly yesterday, and I mean, if we said we like the idea of doing something there, but our idea is a blinking red light. That'll do the job and save us a lot of money and be done with it. We could use that for something else. Residents out there were talking about possibly around Finger Road, not Finger Road, but the Badger Road intersection instead. How much latitude, you're talking that there's not a lot of latitude in this project as far as the funding goes. If we get to the end of the public process and the input that we're getting is overwhelmingly negative, and I don't know that it will be. What is DOT's position on that to try and modify that project? Do you have the rights to modify it? Could we use the money for something else, or what options do we have there?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can answer a couple of those questions, and then I might need to defer depending on who else is online. But the funding program for this project was through our Highway Safety Improvement Program, and that is a pretty data-driven and then scored program. So it gets adopted into an annual plan. So any changes to the projects would just need to go back through and we would amend that plan. And if it's a decision that we postpone it or that there's modifications, then our project team, who I believe kind of led the workshop earlier today or yesterday, would work through that. So we want to find a solution there that works. That funding in particular, it wouldn't just be shifted. If we didn't move forward with that project, it wouldn't just stay. This is a statewide program, and it's meant to target areas where there's the greatest number of incidences. So if that project doesn't move forward, it would go down to areas of significant number of incidences to address. So yeah, let's hear what the comments come back as, and then I think regroup, and be great to have a letter, I think, from the committees and boards, stating the concern and consensus, and then regrouping on where the project is at would be my recommendation. But I'd ask anybody online on the project team if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, hi, this is Nathan Stephen from DOT. I'm the Regional Traffic and Safety Engineer for Northern Region and manage our region's HSIP program. So yeah, Catherine Keith covered it pretty well for us there. If this project comes back with overwhelmingly negative feedback and you don't want to move forward with this project, then those funds will just go back into the HSIP program, and we'll look to put those towards another project. This can't be, what am I trying to say here? The proposed mitigation was a roundabout, and being a data-driven program, the way it was scored on a cost-benefit basis, that's how it was nominated. So I guess wait and see what the public feedback is. I know been discussion in the past of, well, can we just Trim, sight lines and do other things, and you certainly can, but it's not going to score to be nominated as a HSIP funded program. So I can answer any other questions anybody else has.
This is Jerry again. So the opinion is if we alter it too greatly, we'll probably lose the funds.
Most likely, yes.
Okay, your turn.
If I may, Mr. Stephen, if we were to edit, add and adjust maybe the intersection at Badger and Nordale, which is also problematic, along with the intersection at Badger and Petey, relative to those same intersections with, let's say, blinky lights, to improve the whole dynamic of that triangle in the North Pole area. What are your thoughts about turning that into a single project with the amendment? And how that would score?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So as I covered yesterday in the workshop, this year our nomination period is typically starts in March, April. And so we screen for the crash data, and Badger Road will be eligible on our screening process for this year. It hasn't been in the past 3 years because of the Badger two-way left turn lane that was finished in construction in 2020. So or 19. It's been waiting to collect 3 years of post-construction crash data. And so now it's eligible, and our initial screenings on the high crash location list was that Badger Road is popping up on our hotspots. So we'll definitely be screening Badger Road at those intersections, Petey, Hearst, Nordale, Holmes, I think is on there as well, to look at mitigation for those locations, and whether that pans out as a roundabout or warrants a signal. We'll go through and analyze all those options.
Yeah, to follow up on Mr. Church's, you mentioned that, so there was a period of collecting crash data. If this roundabout went through, would that then make the area ineligible for future HSIP projects for a period of time?
Are you referencing the Nordale PD location in particular?
Yeah, the one that is going out for public comment.
Yeah, so if the Nordale PD roundabout went through as a project and then was constructed, then just that intersection would be excluded from being looked at in our screening process for the next 3 years after the project was completed. So just that PD Nordale intersection, so probably like 200 feet in either direction of the center of that roundabout, approximately.
Thank you very much. If I may, just a follow-up question. You mentioned analytics based on your upgrades of Badger Road in the last 3 years. Is that available that you could send out to the board so we can review those analytics?
Yeah, you can publicly request the crash data for the entire Badger Road corridor. Is that what you're asking?
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I'd like to formally request that you send out that crash data to everybody on the policy board for the Badger Road area.
Okay, will do.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Okay, just to point out the public hearing, do you have dates on that yet that you can tell us or not?
Are you talking to me, Mr. Clear?
Anybody?
Yes. For the tip amendment, you mean, but this project included.
Yeah, but as far as public hearing, it's a 30-day period.
It's a 30-day period, yes. There's one step I need to complete, and that is meeting with our federal partners, Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, and the EPA to talk about air quality conformity. They want to review
And then we'll have dates for the public.
Correct, so then I hope to hold that meeting next week,
Okay,
and then as fast as I can get this out the door for 30 days, I would hope I could get this out by the end of February.
for whatever reason, this project is raised a lot of discussion, and I just want to make sure the public has an opportunity to weigh in. That they're well informed of it. Anyone else? Thank you, really long. Item 8C, call for project nominations for EV charging stations. That is just an information item, I think. Jackson, you said that you want to hold that up.
Yes, so the direction I have from the board at this time is to issue the call for project nominations for EV charging stations. That was the motion that was passed at our last policy board meeting. I made the executive decision to pause and not issue that based on what I had been reading in the presidential executive orders and then the orders from the transportation secretary. I'm not saying that we should not do this and we should reprogram all the funding onto something else, but I just got nervous about this and I'm putting this back on the agenda so the board can help guide me in what to do next. We did hear from Ms. Catherine Keith earlier in the meeting that the state is willing to take on that risk in the event that the project moves forward and there's not federal reimbursement of those funds. That's sufficient to me to move forward, but I did not want to put the state or ourselves in a position of risk where we might move forward with a project that was not reimbursed. There is a difference in the funding that's been targeted in the presidential executive order. That's the NEVI funding, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program funds. This is the funds the state is using for the build out of EV charging stations between Anchorage and Fairbanks. We have a different funding source that we're proposing to use here, and that's carbon reduction program funds. And those funds are not specifically targeted at this time, but we're still looking at electric vehicle charging stations. So I'm reporting back to you. I got nervous. I paused this. This is an action item today. I have my direction from the board to issue the call for project nominations. And so you can nod your head and say, go ahead, or you can say, let's talk about this again in March. I don't think anything's time critical here, but.
Thank you. Mr. Fox, you mentioned your concern was risk about moving forward with this. Can you describe what your concern is with risk when we get stuck with the funds, being required to put out the funds, but not having the federal funds coming in to backstop it? What was your risk concern?
So my risk concern is that if we initiate a project start and then design activities commence, where you might spend $500,000 on designing this bundle of electric vehicle charging stations, and then eventually it goes to construction. But so the state, they utilize state money to, pay staff members or pay a consultant team to do this design work, and then they submit for reimbursement with federal funds to kind of backfill the money that had been spent. So you can get into a situation where it's called non-participating funds. You can spend a bunch of state funds, turn in reimbursements, the reimbursements are rejected. And so then the state is out of that money, or sometimes federal funds are reimbursed to you. And then for one reason or another, the project never goes to construction. And then you've got to reimburse the federal funds that you reimbursed with. And so it could have a financial consequence primarily to DOT. And I did not want to put them in that position. But if DOT is okay with us moving forward, I'd appreciate that input, which I think I've already heard. But.
Ms. Keith?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think process-wise, as we obligate funds, that's when we have a decision point, processing paperwork on each of these projects. So I just encourage you to work with that. There's just a lot of policy level calls right now, and carbon reduction funds is one of our key fund programs, especially within this population group for August redistribution. So where there are programs like this that are in hard to obligate funds, we want to move forward with them typically. So yeah, if you have questions like this, just, you can please send us that information so we have it in writing, how we want to proceed. And I think that kind of protects everybody and can ideally get projects moving.
Good discussion. Yeah, my only concern was to send out the paperwork and have these people go through all the rigmarole of that, only to have us come along and say, thank you, but we're not doing this. It's your businesses, and I don't have the time as a business person to tinker around with that kind of thing. If DOT thinks that you should proceed with it and that there's a possible funding source for that, you want to take that on, then I would be happy to back you up on that.
Jackson, has there been obligations? Oh, sorry.
Go
Didn't
ahead.
mean to cut-
No, there's not been obligations to date, but there's a $500,000 project start for the design of the EV stations that could be obligated at any time.
That would be excellent path is to submit that and see how it goes processing. And then once it's approved, move forward with public engagement so we don't mislead the public for sure. If
That makes
that's
sense.
acceptable. Yeah.
Is that agreeable? Mayor Church.
If we kick the can down the road another month, is there any harm that may come from that on anyone's behalf here to let the dust settle and see what really happens?
As far as expenditure of our federal funds and obligation of our federal funds, we should really have this obligated by July 1st. So we have a little bit of time here, but we want to see this obligated prior to July 1st.
Understood.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just 1 month delay, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Just 1 month delay if we see if any of the dust settles from DC. Impact a July 1st obligation to close out the bid and see what's out there, or do we need to move now?
No, what I'm saying is that we do have, a couple months. If you want to wait until the dust settles a little bit longer. I feel like we live in this world of uncertainty, and we may still be very uncertain months from now. So, anyways, I'm not in a rush, but as Catherine Keith stated, if we could obligate the funds this year's funds. We should do that, but we need to make a decision. If we don't move forward with this, I need to give you all a proposal on what we spend the funding on something else this year.
Because this is not an action item, do we need to wait until the next meeting, or can we make a motion now?
You don't need to do anything.
Okay. We'll leave it on the agenda for next month. Pick up the conversation again then.
Okay, move on. Item number 9, new business, letter of support for House Bill number 26 relating to statewide public and community transit plans. This is an action item, so I'd like to go to public comment first. Anyone wishing to speak to this? Anyone online? Not seeing anyone, okay. Turn it over to staff report, Jackson.
Yes, and I'll be brief. Representative Genevieve Mina reached out to my office looking for a letter of support from House Planning for House Bill number 26. I did review the bill. It's pretty straightforward. It's really just tasking the state with developing a statewide transit plan. And what I envisioned that to look like is really showcasing to communities across the state that there's different pots of federal transit administration funding that comes to the state. There's certain pots for urban areas, certain pots for rural areas. And there's many communities throughout the state that have coordinated human services, transportation plans and small shuttle services, but there are federal funds that they can access for not only operation of those transit systems, but also capital purchases of buses. And so I think we're pretty well versed in this federal transit administration funding at the MPO level in Anchorage and in Fairbanks, and People Mover uses it down there and up here in Fairbanks. Max Transit uses it up here. But this could help be kind of an umbrella plan to kind of share with rural communities throughout the state the opportunity for funding if they have an idea for a transit service within their community. So I view this as a pretty benign House bill. I certainly, at Fast Plan, we certainly support the transportation planning process and sharing with the public the funding opportunities that are available. I was also reviewing STIP Amendment number 2 here earlier this week, and I saw that there's funding in that STIP amendment for a statewide transit plan. So I think DOT is on board with completing this effort based on the funding that's proposed in the STIP amendment. But anyways, in any event, the House bill is in the packet. It's pretty short and sweet, and then the sectional analysis and sponsor statement are also included there from Representative Mina's office.
Thank you. Other questions? Mayor George.
Just to clarify, you're only, or you're asking for support of the bill itself, not asking to take on aspects of the bill as it pertains to the general Fairbanks area. Is that correct?
That's correct. The action here today would be approve a letter of support, so this can be passed around the legislature as this bill moves to the House and Senate.
Okay.
Just a letter.
Mr. Olds?
Just as a representative of the state, I'll recuse myself from discussion and voting on legislation. So.
Mr. Chair, same for me as well.
Let's see what happens.
Well, just a question for anybody with the DOT and all, is this a bill that you folks support? Is it one that you have questions on? Is it problematic? I'm kind of, ironically, I was kind of relying on you to see what your opinions were. Does anyone want to chime in?
Mr. Chair, we can provide an analysis if that's helpful, but at this time, I wouldn't be able to comment on it. I'm sorry.
We'd like to hear from Representative Mina's office regarding this. I mean, staff thinks it's a decent bill for our ability to have a good public input process in the future. I certainly trust them, but all my experiences, the State Department of Transportation, certainly, you guys followed your protocols as far as I understand, so I expect you to have an official position on it without impacts on it. If we have questions on the implementation, we could ask them, or we could wait to hear from Representative Mina's office. I mean, it's only February 18th in the first legislative session of the entire legislature for a 2-year process. So they've got plenty of time for us to come back and put a little bit of thought into this if we wanted to bring it up next month.
Yeah, I think it's a little awkward because I'm weighing in on the bill and kind of appreciate what Jackson says, but I've learned in politics over the years, sometimes a lot more to things than EPI, and I don't want to create work for one of the policy board members too, you know, and without having proper input on this. I feel a little bit on the leads. It's up to you folks. It'll be an action item, so we would need a motion. Okay, seeing no more comments, is there a motion to be made?
I'd like to bring it up at the next meeting. Can we keep it on the agenda?
You want to postpone to the next meeting?
I move to postpone until the next meeting.
A motion by Mayor Hopkins to postpone. Anyone else?
I'll second that. I apologize for whoever may have to take on that extra duty and work. But I think it's worth diving into just a little bit further.
Second by Mr. Church. Is there any comments?
Look forward to talking about it next month.
Seeing none, Jackson, would you call?
Yes, Mayor Hopkins.
For postponing next month, yes.
Mayor Church,
Yes.
Mr. Kress.
Yes.
And Mr. Cleaver.
Yes.
I don't recall that, right?
One, two, three, that's four of us.
Yep.
Okay. Item 10, informational items, presidential executive order unleashing American energy. Chief Fox.
I'm gonna keep this brief and not go into the details here. As shown on page 133, I just want to make note that the National Association of MPOs is sending weekly updates to all the MPO directors throughout the country. So I'm receiving these, and as news comes out of Washington DC, they're keeping us informed, and they're letting us know what the impact might be to MPOs across the country. So I'm looking at these as something strikes my attention. I'll bring that to the Electrical Committee and Policy Board. And then behind that, I just included the presidential executive order and then the orders that have recently come out of the Transportation Secretary's office of things that I thought were interesting. I have highlighted with a red box to read. And I will not provide any further comment on that. That concludes my report. You may read that at your leisure.
Any questions? Anyone? Go on to item 10B. Obligations and offsets.
As of the end of January, obligations are still pretty low. We're only at 8% total of our federal funds per area. Hopefully this picks up through February and March. But I'm happy to note on page 159, we have some new offsets from the College Road Boo allowance. It's over. Yes, there. In any event, we have $300,000 in offsets, which are available for any project increases that on existing projects that are in design and or during construction. This is a reserve for change orders. So it went from 0 up to 300,000, which is a great thing for us to have in our back pocket. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions? Item 11, other issues, anyone? Policy board, any other issues? I have one. As long as I can remember, we've always had a pre-meeting, which is, I always found helpful, especially when you're going through 100+ pages, trying to read it here at the meeting. It usually takes place a day or two before the regular meeting. These are not publicly noticed meetings. So if they're not publicly noticed, only 3 of the 7 board members can attend on that. That's always caused me a little bit of, I always wondered if 4 people showed up, who doesn't get to attend? That can be easily mitigated by just publicly notifying it when we put out our regular notification for this meeting in case we have that problem. I'm not sure everybody agrees with doing that, but I'm opening it up for discussion here, whether we should do that or not. Because I find them very helpful, and I would encourage everybody to attend them if they want to.
While I appreciate the sentiment, a lot of the utility of those pre-meetings for me is to have a forum where I can not publicly ask really dumb questions. And having a forum that is, not on the record, not a public meeting, where I can explore some of my more ill-founded ideas with Jackson and staff has been really helpful. I think that if we just made it an additional public meeting, it would become just an extension of this meeting, which given the time might be useful. But I think it would remove the utility of the pre-meeting.
Well, it would become essentially a work session, and it's not open to public comments, although the public could attend if they wanted to. Other thoughts? To our two state DOT people, would you ever avail yourself of the pre-meeting, or is this something that you would not interested in?
And speaking for myself, absolutely. When I've seen working sessions before, whether it's a borough or somewhere else, those sessions are always very informative Whether it's a smaller group or a larger public notice group, we can absolutely kind of help and better understand the topics at hand for the upcoming board meeting. Yeah, we would participate.
Yeah, and to be clear, not DOT, but state. And I don't know that I can guarantee always attending, but certainly if I don't have, I've got the room and the meetings there, there's always something new to learn. And so those kinds of meetings can be great.
Yeah, and this is Nathan Stephen again. Yep, happy to participate and help out in any way I can. So, yep.
I mean, it's not their policy board, but I'm very, very conscious of the Open Meetings Act, and I don't want to preclude anybody from attending if we happen to have 4 people. It doesn't, I can't remember it happening, but it could happen. What would your directions be on that? Mayor Hopkins?
Yeah, I certainly, I've been to 2 of the 4, I believe, in my time frame that have been available to me, 2 of the 4 pre-planning meetings or pre-discussion meetings for the pre-policy meetings. I think that certainly it's, you know, similar situation for when you've got 4 city council members or 4 assembly members in the same room. Someone's got to leave, and it's a first come, first served kind of basis, which doesn't lend itself to a great conversation, but it does lend itself to ensuring we're not running afoul of the Open Meetings Act, which I think is very important. So I also, you know, ask plenty of stupid questions in those meetings and understand you can make good sausage from having the liberty to ask stupid questions. So I think it's a decent thing to make it a first come, first served. All 7 policy members are invited, I'm guessing, whether we show them up on Zoom or not. I think you were on a Zoom yesterday for it, Mr. Krass, so it's not that we are limited to physical presence. I think it's a question we should ponder a little bit, because I don't disagree with the Open Meetings Act first come, first served situation, definitely, but I also think it can result in good, like the PD road discussion, to understand what the emotions were that we had on those conversations yesterday. So I didn't have to ask like 20 minutes of questions to understand what the one question I could ask today would have been. So I think it did help in that way. But certainly a topic for discussion in the future. I think they serve a purpose both ways.
I think what I'll go ahead and do is put it on the agenda for next time. I feel pretty strongly that we need to encourage people to attend the pre-meetings. And to make sure we don't run afoul of state law. So I'll put it on and we can vote it up or vote it down. Thank you for the input on that. Any other policy board comments? Okay, seeing Ms. Jaff, ready to share your comments about traffic circles and signs in South France.
Yeah, in 2 weeks in the South of France, I didn't interact with a single traffic light. Everything there, it's roundabouts and sort of logically yielding intersections. A population of a couple million people in that region, and they seem to figure it out. Different climate.
Do you want to talk about the no sign part?
Yeah, the lack of signs was also really interesting. It's in some ways it's a free for all, but in a lot of ways it results in a say more of a shared attitude about things. So
all shared space.
Yeah, a shared space. As someone's shared article here.
Okay, thank you for that. With that, did I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Mayor Hopkins?
Second.
Right.
Too long.
Any objections? Seeing none, it's unanimous. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.